The laughter stopped as if someone had pulled a plug from the evening. Silverware froze midair. All eyes turned toward the end of the table to her. "I've hated you since day one," Amanda said. "You disgust me, and I'm tired of pretending." My smile didn't falter. I simply folded my napkin, placed it neatly beside my plate, and gave a polite little wave. "Good to know," I said softly. No one breathed. My son, Ethan, looked like someone had slapped him. The sparkle in his eyes, so proud moments ago as he toasted his engagement to Amanda, was gone, replaced by disbelief and panic. It was supposed to be a celebration. An intimate engagement dinner at a downtown restaurant, just family and closest friends. The ring had been presented. Champagne had flowed. Everyone had been happy, until Amanda stood, clinked her glass, and shattered everything. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. Or maybe I did, and I had simply hoped I was wrong. I had raised Ethan alone. His father died when he was just 6. I worked nights cleaning office buildings and spent days helping him with school. There were years I skipped dinner so he could have seconds. There were winters I wore thrift store shoes while he had new boots. But I never complained. Watching him grow into a kind, ambitious man had been the greatest reward of my life. When he introduced me to Amanda a year ago, I was thrilled. She was beautiful, smart, and came from money. Too much money, maybe. She didn't shake my hand the first time we met, just nodded. When I brought a homemade pie to her apartment, she smiled like it was a joke and never took it out of the bag. I told myself she was just shy or nervous. But tonight's outburst proved otherwise. Amanda hadn't just been cold. She had been waiting. After her announcement, Amanda sat down with a huff, as if she had just taken out the trash. The room remained silent, the clinking of glass and chatter now a distant memory. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my water. But I didn't cry. I wouldn't give her that. "I'm sorry," Amanda continued, rolling her eyes as if my reaction disappointed her. "But I can't fake it anymore. This charade. You pretending to be some sweet old lady, it's exhausting." Ethan stood. "Amanda." "No," she snapped. "You don't see it. She manipulates you with guilt. With silence. With her sad little stories about how hard things were. She uses her struggle as a leash around your neck." I watched him. My son. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at me, pleading, confused. I gave him a nod. It said, "It's okay. Let her speak." Because the more she spoke, the more she revealed. "Tell them," Amanda said, turning to the rest of the table. "Tell them how she guilt trips you every time we go somewhere nice. How she makes you feel bad for moving up in the world. How she clings to you like a vine." Ethan's voice was low. "That's not true. Isn't it?" she hissed. "She shows up unannounced. She rearranges things in our apartment. She buys ugly little trinkets and expects us to display them like family treasures." I remembered those gifts. A framed photo of Ethan as a child. A small ceramic angel. A cross-stitch saying, "Home is where your mother is." Maybe they were old-fashioned, but they were given with love. "I just wanted you to feel like home," I whispered. Amanda scoffed. "I want a real home, not a shrine to your struggle." I stood up then. The chair scraped the floor, loud in the stunned silence. I looked around the table. Old friends. Distant cousins. Amanda's family, all wealthy, polished, suddenly very interested in their wine glasses. Then I looked at Ethan. "Son," I said, my voice steady. "If this is the woman you love, then that's your choice. But understand this: a marriage built on shame will rot from the inside." Amanda's father shifted uncomfortably. Her mother stared at her plate. I turned to Amanda. "You don't know me," I said. "You've never tried to. And that's fine. But don't mistake my kindness for weakness." Her jaw tightened. "You don't belong in our life," she spat. I smiled. "For real this time." "Sweetheart," I said gently, "you haven't even begun to live long enough to know where you'll belong in the end." Then I picked up my coat and walked out. I didn't cry in the taxi. I sat quietly, watching the city lights blur past. My heart ached not from Amanda's words, but from the look in my son's eyes. He was torn, and I knew he would be. At home, I made a cup of tea and sat by the window. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like whispers. Memories came back in waves. Ethan's first day of school, his teenage rebellion, his college graduation. I had stood by him through every storm. And now? Now, I would stand still. Let him come to me, or not. Because real love doesn't chase after approval. 2 days passed. Then 3. No call. No message. On the 4th day, There was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Ethan, his face pale, eyes red. "I didn't know," he said. I didn't want to believe it. I reached for his hand. "You don't have to choose." "Yes," he said firmly. "I do." Ethan stepped into my living room like he was walking on cracked glass. He didn't sit, just stood there, arms stiff at his sides, his breath shaky. I could tell he hadn't slept. The soft shadow of stubble lined his jaw, his clothes slightly wrinkled, not the polished, sharp sun I usually saw. "I didn't know how bad it was, Mom," he said again, quieter this time. "You knew," I replied gently, "but you weren't ready to see it." He flinched, not from my words, but from the truth in them. "I kept making excuses," he admitted, finally sinking into the armchair across from me, telling myself she just had high standards, that she came from a different world, that you'd warm up to each other. I stirred my tea slowly, letting him speak. "But that night the way she looked at you, like you were nothing, like she wanted to humiliate you in front of everyone." He looked up at me, guilt flashing in his eyes. "And I let her." I shook my head. "You stood, Ethan. You tried to speak. That's more than most sons would do in a moment like that. But it wasn't enough." "No," I said softly. "It wasn't." The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was necessary. Thick, heavy like a storm cloud that had yet to rain. "I want to call it off," he said after a moment. "The engagement." I looked at him carefully. "Don't do it because of me." "I'm doing it because of her," he said firmly. "Because I realized I've been trying to fit her into the idea of love. But love doesn't look like that. It doesn't shame you. It doesn't try to erase the people who raised you." My throat tightened. He continued, "You were right. A marriage built on shame, I felt it that night. It's already crumbling, and we haven't even signed the papers." I reached for his hand, held it tight. "Then walk away with your head high," I said. "It's not failure. It's freedom." Amanda didn't take it well. I didn't hear it from Ethan directly, but the news came through his cousin, Lily, who worked at the same firm as Amanda's sister. "She went ballistic," Lily told me over coffee a week later. "Threw the ring across the room. Accused Ethan of being brainwashed by his old hag of a mother." I winced at the phrase, but didn't respond. "She didn't love him," Lily continued. "She loved the image. A handsome, successful man with a tragic backstory. It made her feel superior." I thought of Amanda's carefully curated life, the designer clothes, the filtered photos, the curated captions about success and perfection. Maybe Ethan was just another accessory, a human trophy. Lily sipped her drink. "Ethan's better off." I nodded, though my heart still ached. Not because he was single again, but because I knew this experience would scar him. Love, when twisted into something cruel, doesn't leave without taking a piece of you. 2 months passed. Ethan moved into a new apartment. Smaller, but warmer. I helped him unpack one weekend, and for the first time in a long while, we laughed real, full-bellied laughter over old books and tangled extension cords. He was healing, slowly, but I wasn't done yet. Not with Amanda, not with what she'd said. Because while Ethan had walked away, Amanda had walked free. She was back on social media within days of the breakup, painting herself as a victim, vague posts about toxic in-laws and emotional vampires. One even showed a quote that read, "Just because someone gave you life doesn't mean they deserve a place in yours." And the comments? They applauded her. "Good for you, Queen. Setting boundaries is self-care. She's better off without that mama's boy." It burned. Not for my own pride, I didn't care what strangers thought, but because of the message it sent to every son or daughter trying to do right by their parents. It told them that compassion was weakness, that love had a price tag, that aging mothers were burdens to shed. I couldn't let that go unanswered. I wrote a letter. I didn't post it online, didn't send it to Amanda. I just wrote it for myself, for anyone who'd ever been shamed for surviving, for being too ordinary, for not fitting into someone else's polished world. And then, weeks later, I read it aloud at a local women's group where I volunteered. There were tears, applause. One woman came up afterward and hugged me tightly. "My daughter-in-law calls me vintage," she whispered, like I'm some dusty lamp she's forced to display. Another woman said, "You put into words everything I've felt but never dared say." It didn't erase Amanda's cruelty, but it reclaimed my voice. And sometimes, that's the only justice we get, the quiet kind. Ethan eventually met someone new. Her name was Marisol. She was quiet, kind-eyed, with a laugh that came from her belly and a gentleness that reminded me of Ethan's late father. When he introduced us, she brought me a loaf of banana bread wrapped in a checkered cloth. I know it's not much, she said shyly. But my abuela always said, lead with kindness, not grand entrances. I smiled, holding back tears. You're already off to a perfect start. And just like that, something shifted. This time, it felt real. No tension, no performative gestures, just warmth. Acceptance. A shared meal at my small kitchen table. When Ethan looked at her, he didn't look dazzled or infatuated. He looked safe. One evening, months later, Marisol asked if she could hear the story. About the dinner, she said. I've only heard bits from Ethan, but I'd like to hear your side, if that's okay. I hesitated. Then I told it. Everything. The champagne, the insult, the silence, the wave. When I finished, Marisol reached across the table and took my hand. She was threatened by your strength, she said, and she couldn't break you. I blinked back emotion. Maybe. Or maybe she just never learned how to love anything that wasn't shiny. She squeezed my hand. Well, she smiled, you shine plenty. Just in a better kind of light. Later that night, I stood at the window with a cup of tea, watching the streetlights flicker on. I thought of that dinner again, the way Amanda's words had pierced the room, the silence that followed, the fear that maybe, just maybe, my son would choose someone else's comfort over my truth. But he hadn't. He chose love, not guilt, not image. And in doing so, he reminded me of the very thing I had tried to teach him all those years ago, that dignity is silent but unshakable. That even when humiliated, we have power in how we respond. Smile, wave, walk away. Because sometimes, the greatest strength is refusing to stoop low. The phone rang one morning as I was kneading dough in the kitchen. I wiped my hands and picked it up, expecting a sales call, or perhaps the pharmacy confirming my refill. But it was Amanda's mother. Mrs. Grant, she asked. Her voice was strained, brittle. I hadn't spoken to her since the dinner. Yes. There was a long pause. I'm calling because Amanda isn't well. She's spiraling. I stood still. I'm sorry to hear that. She's not eating. She lost her job after she showed up late several times and argued with her boss. She's drinking too much. She lashes out at me. At everyone. I waited. I don't know what to do. Her mother confessed, her voice cracking. She keeps saying Ethan ruined her. That you ruined her. I took a deep breath. I'm not sure how I can help. There was silence. I just thought you'd want to know. And then she hung up. I stood in my quiet kitchen, staring at the wall. The timer for the bread dinged, but I didn't move. Was I supposed to feel sorry for Amanda? Was this karma? I didn't know. But part of me, the part that still believed in second chances, hoped she'd find healing. Not for my sake. Not for Ethan's. But for her own. Because no one wakes up cruel. They grow into it, piece by bitter piece. And they can grow out of it, too, if they want to. That weekend, Ethan invited me over for dinner at his place. Marisol would be cooking her grandmother's arroz con pollo, and he insisted I bring my famous apple tart. Their apartment was modest but warm, with sunlit windows, books on every surface, and the soft scent of vanilla and cumin in the air. Marisol greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and a soft apron hug. Make yourself at home, Mama Ruth. The words hit me like a lullaby. Mama Ruth. No tension, no bitterness hiding beneath forced civility, just genuine warmth. Dinner was delicious. We laughed until our sides hurt over Ethan's failed attempts to help with the rice, and I found myself telling stories I hadn't shared in years about his father, about my youth, about dreams I never chased because life had other plans. I always wanted to travel, I said absently. See Ireland. Or Greece. Why didn't you? Marisol asked. I shrugged. Bills. School fees. Groceries. I was too busy building a life for Ethan to go chasing sunsets. She looked at Ethan, then back at me. Well, she said with a mischievous grin. How about we start with one sunset? A month later, we were in Santorini. It was Marisol's idea, a surprise gift to celebrate my birthday. Ethan pooled some savings, and they both insisted. You've earned more than just survival, Mom, he said as we boarded the plane. You've earned joy. I cried on the plane. Quietly. But I did. Santorini was more than just blue domes and white walls. It was peace. Restoration. A place where no one knew me as the woman humiliated at a dinner party, just another traveler, wandering, living. One night, As we sat on a terrace overlooking the sea, Marisol leaned close. "Thank you for raising a man who knows how to love," she said. I couldn't speak. I only smiled and waved at the sunset. Months passed. Amanda didn't call. Her name stopped coming up in conversation. Ethan never asked about her, and I didn't bring her up. It was as if that chapter had finally closed. Until one rainy afternoon, I received a small package at my door. There was no return address. Inside was a single photo. It was from the engagement dinner. Someone had snapped it just after Amanda's outburst. In the photo, I was sitting calmly, napkin in hand, giving my small wave. Amanda was mid-sneer. The guests looked frozen. There was a sticky note on the back of the photo. In unfamiliar, shaky handwriting. It said, "You won. I don't know who I am anymore." No name. But I knew. I held the photo for a long time. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from understanding. She had seen the strength in my silence. She had mistaken it for smugness. But now, maybe, just maybe, she saw it for what it truly was: endurance. Grace. Not the kind that demands revenge. The kind that survives without apology. One winter morning, I was planting tulip bulbs in the back garden when Ethan came out, holding his phone with a strange look. "You'll want to hear this," he said. It was Amanda. She was on a podcast, a popular one, about emotional growth and transformation. I blinked, unsure I heard him right. "She's telling her story," he said, "about the night of the engagement dinner, about how it unraveled her, and what it taught her." We sat and listened together, earbuds shared between us. Her voice was different, raw, almost tired. "I said something awful to a woman I barely knew," Amanda confessed on air. She didn't fight back. She just smiled, waved, and left me standing in a pile of my own poison. There was a pause. That night cracked something open in me. I saw how ugly I'd become. I blamed her for everything wrong in my life when really, I hated myself. Tears slipped down my cheeks. Not from pain. From the quiet power of accountability. "I'm still learning," Amanda said, "but I want to be someone worthy of forgiveness." That night, I wrote her a letter. Not a long one. Just a few lines. "Dear Amanda, grace isn't weakness. Healing begins when we stop pointing outward. You've taken the first step. I wish you peace. Ruth." I didn't send it, but I left it folded inside my journal. Some things don't need to be delivered to be true. Winter melted into spring. The tulips I planted bloomed early, their vibrant colors a reminder that even the coldest seasons don't last forever. I often sat on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching bees dance lazily between blossoms. Sometimes Ethan joined me. Sometimes Marisol brought over warm bread or herbal teas from a market she loved. We didn't talk about Amanda anymore. Not because we were avoiding her, but because the story had changed. One afternoon, while organizing old boxes in my attic, I found Ethan's kindergarten drawing a crude stick figure family under a crayon sun. I was a triangle in a blue dress, smiling. He was beside me, holding my hand. There was no father in the picture. Just us. I brought the drawing downstairs and placed it in a new frame. Marisol noticed it the next time she came by. "You've always been his home," she said quietly. I smiled. "And now he's building his own." Marisol and Ethan got engaged the following summer. There was no grand dinner, no tuxedos, no sparkling chandeliers, just a backyard barbecue with friends, homemade sangria, and laughter spilling into the night air. When Ethan announced the engagement, Marisol turned to me first. "Ruth, will you bless this?" she asked. "I can't say yes until I know you're with us." I reached across the table, tears threatening to spill. "I don't need to bless it," I said. "I see it. I feel it. And I trust it." They married in the fall, under the maple tree in our backyard. The same yard where Ethan had learned to ride his bike, scraped his knees, and planted tomato seeds. Life had come full circle. And as they exchanged vows, I realized something quietly beautiful. I had been waiting all these years not for someone to accept me, but for someone to love my son as I did, without condition, without shame. Marisol did. And that was enough. One rainy evening not long after their wedding, I got a letter in the mail. A real one, hand-addressed, the ink slightly smudged from dampness. It was from Amanda. "Ruth, I don't know what I'm hoping for by writing this. Maybe nothing. Maybe just clarity. I've been in therapy for almost a year now. The night of the dinner, it haunted me. Not just because I embarrassed myself, but because of the way you handled it. With grace. With silence. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't fight me. You just left me there, alone with my own ugliness. I hated you because you were everything I couldn't be. Strong, steady, loved without trying. And maybe a part of me wanted to destroy that to watch it crack. But it didn't. You didn't. You stayed calm. And I shattered. You don't owe me anything. Not your time. Not your forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying. Slowly, clumsily, but honestly. Sincerely. Amanda. I read it twice. Then once more. I didn't cry. Not out of coldness, but because it didn't hurt anymore. That chapter, once sharp as glass, now felt distant. Like an old scar that no longer stung. I placed the letter in my keepsake box, right next to the framed kindergarten drawing. Because people can grow. And some wounds, when faced with honesty, can finally begin to close. A year passed. Ethan and Marisol welcomed a baby girl, Sophia. They asked me to stay with them the first few weeks, and I did. I held Sophia against my chest for hours, breathing in her tiny warmth, rocking her through midnight cries. One night, while Marisol rested and Ethan made tea, I sang a lullaby my mother used to hum to me. Sophia's eyes blinked slowly, her lashes fluttering as she drifted into sleep. I whispered into her ear, "You are loved. You are safe. You come from a line of strong women." And in that moment, I felt peace. Not the kind that comes suddenly, like a door slammed shut, but the kind that builds slowly, like dawn breaking over a field. I had survived the bitterness, outlasted the humiliation, and found, at last, not just dignity but joy. Months later, on a sunny afternoon, I was in the park with Sophia when I noticed a familiar figure across the grass. Amanda. She was sitting alone on a bench, reading. Her posture was different now, no sharpness in her shoulders, no tension in her jaw. Her hair was tied back simply. No dramatic sunglasses. Just a quiet presence. She looked up and saw me. For a moment, we just stared. Then she stood. Walked over. Not quickly. Not nervously. Just honestly. "May I?" she asked, nodding toward the bench beside me. I moved slightly. Of course. We sat in silence, watching Sophia kick her little legs in her stroller. Amanda glanced at her. "She's beautiful." "She is," I said. More silence. Then, she whispered, "I was awful to you." "Yes," I said gently. "You were." She swallowed. "I still carry it." "You've started to change," I said. "That's what matters." Amanda looked at me, truly looked. "Do you think people like me deserve second chances?" I thought of that night. Of the wave. Of the poison she spat, and the silence I chose. I nodded. "Yes. But not because of what you've done, because of who you choose to become next." Amanda exhaled, eyes glossy. Then she stood. "Thank you, Ruth, for not becoming like me that night." And she walked away. Not broken, but beginning. That evening, I told Ethan about it. He sat quietly, processing. "She's not the same woman," he said finally. "No," I agreed. "Neither am I." He nodded slowly, then smiled. "You're still the strongest person I know." I looked at Sophia in his arms. "Maybe," I said, "but I hope she grows up even stronger." Sophia took her first steps in my living room. Marisol had run to the kitchen for her phone. Ethan was changing a light bulb. I was just standing there, arms open, when that little girl let go of the couch cushion, wobbled once, and toddled straight toward me like I'd always been the destination. I caught her just before she toppled. She squealed, wrapping her arms around my neck. Her hair smelled like sunlight and baby shampoo. My heart swelled. We cheered. We laughed. Marisol cried. Ethan recorded it all a minute too late. But I was there fully, completely for that tiny miracle. And in that moment, the dinner, the shame, Amanda's words, all of it felt like nothing more than a shadow, far behind us, fading with each tiny footstep. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Weekends were for family breakfasts. Ethan grilled on Sundays. Marisol taught Sophia to bake on Fridays. I grew tomatoes again in the back garden. They never quite turned out right, but Sophia loved picking them anyway, even the sour ones. One afternoon, Marisol handed me a sealed envelope. "It's an invitation," she said softly. "Amanda's wedding." I raised an eyebrow. "To who?" Marisol smiled. "Someone she met through her therapy group. An older man. Kind. He's divorced with 2 daughters. She's different now. Softer." I opened the invitation. It was simple, elegant. No gold foil drama. Just names, a date, and a handwritten note at the bottom. There's no pressure to attend, but you were the one who taught me how to begin again. I'll never forget that. Amanda. I folded the card slowly. Are you going to go? Ethan asked that night. I thought about it. Truly thought. I might, I said. Not because I need closure, but because I want to honor what came after. So I went. I didn't wear anything fancy, just a pale blue dress and the pearls Ethan had given me on my birthday. The wedding was held in a quiet garden. Fewer people, fewer masks, no champagne towers or crystal chandeliers. Just laughter and wildflowers and the sound of wind through leaves. Amanda saw me across the aisle. Our eyes met. She gave me a small, almost uncertain smile. And I smiled and waved. This time, it wasn't armor. It was peace. That evening, after the wedding, I sat alone in my living room with a glass of tea and an old photo album on my lap. I flipped through decades of memories. Ethan as a baby, bundled in hospital blankets. His scraped knees. His college graduation. The dinner I'd rather forget. The first photo of Sophia in my arms. Then I reached the last page and tucked into the sleeve was Amanda's first letter, folded and worn. I held it gently, rereading the shaky handwriting. And I realized something. This story wasn't really about Amanda. It wasn't even about what she said to me that night. It was about what I chose not to say back. Because silence, when held with intention, can echo louder than screams. Because dignity, even when bruised, doesn't require an audience. Because grace, when extended to those who don't deserve it, often returns in unexpected ways, sometimes years later, sometimes as a second chance, sometimes as a granddaughter walking into your arms. Months passed. One afternoon, as I sat with Sophia on the porch, watching her color outside the lines of her storybook, she looked up at me with her big, curious eyes. "Grandma," she asked, "why do you always smile when you're quiet?" I blinked. No one had ever asked me that before. I looked at her, this little life made from so much love, so much pain, so much rebuilding, and said, "Because I learned a long time ago that words don't always make things better. But peace? Peace starts right here." I tapped her chest. "In the heart." I nodded. And in the silence between the shouting, I whispered. She giggled, not fully understanding. But one day she would. As I grow older, I think less about revenge, less about who hurt me, and more about what I left behind that mattered. A wave at the right moment. A kind word withheld when anger begged to speak. A truth held with quiet dignity. I don't want to be remembered as the mother who endured an insult at a dinner table. That's not my story. I want to be remembered as the woman who lived long enough to see her son become a man with integrity. As the woman who made space for healing not by force, but by choosing not to collapse. As the woman who showed her granddaughter that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just smiles and waves. Every day as the sun dipped behind the hills of the sleepy town, a lone figure appeared at the rusted gate of St. Mary's Cemetery. Always the same time. Always the same place. He would lean gently against the weathered brick post, his hands holding something wrapped in cloth. He never stepped inside. He only stood there watching, waiting. At first, the townspeople thought he was grieving, perhaps a widower visiting his late wife. But as months turned to years, curiosity fermented into whispers. "He talks to the wind," said Mrs. Hargreaves, the baker's wife. "Doesn't eat at the inn, doesn't speak to anyone," murmured the shopkeeper. The children dared each other to follow him, but he always vanished before they got close. The man at the cemetery gate became a ghost before death, living on the edges of town and memory. But one evening, when autumn had begun to paint the trees in strokes of orange and fire, the man didn't show up. And then the next day, and the day after that, it was the gravedigger, old Merton, who found him, curled on the wooden bench near the cemetery gate, as still as the gravestones beyond. In his lap was the same cloth-covered bundle, a faded photograph, and an old diary tied with string. The diary was written in a shaky hand, its pages worn thin with time and tears. It belonged to a woman named Helena, the very same old woman who, years before, had been buried in plot 417, just beyond the rusted gate. Her story, long forgotten, was now about to breathe again through the words she had left behind. June 14th. Today, I met a boy by the river. He didn't speak much, just watched the water and threw pebbles. But he smiled when I sat beside him. He has kind eyes, lonely eyes, I didn't even ask his name. July 2nd. I keep seeing him. Same bench. Same silence. I talk. He listens. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes, when the sun hits the water just right, he smiles. And that smile feels like a secret being shared. August 30th. He told me his name today. Dad. Just one word. Nothing more. But when he said it, I knew I'd remember it forever. October 10th. He never speaks of family. But once, I saw a bruise on his arm. I didn't ask. He saw me look, and he looked away. I think pain is his native language. December 25th. I gave him a scarf. He gave me silence. But his hands shook when he took it. I think it's the only gift he's ever received. I saw him cry when he thought I wasn't looking. February 5th. He vanished for 3 weeks. I thought I'd lost him. But he came back today thinner, eyes darker. He said, I had to go. That's all. But I knew. I knew he had no home. So I gave him one even if it was just on that bench, beside me. April 3rd. I think I love him. But he's the kind of person who belongs to sadness. I wonder if there's a place in that sadness for me. June 1st. He said he was leaving. For work, he claimed. But I think it's more than that. I think he's afraid of being loved. I didn't stop him. I just watched him walk away. June 2nd, 20th. No entries. Too many tears. July 12th. Today, I visited the cemetery and picked a plot. I don't know why. Maybe because I want to feel close to something still. Something final. I asked to be buried near the gate. Maybe he'll come back one day. Maybe he'll find me. Maybe, just maybe love doesn't end where breath does. The man Dad had returned years later. By then, Helena was gone. But someone had told him. Perhaps the wind. Perhaps guilt. Perhaps memory. He stood there, evening after evening, with her photo in his pocket, her diary in his coat. He never read it aloud. He never cried where anyone could see. But he came as if that gate held more life than any place he'd ever known. After his passing, the townspeople finally gave him a name. The Man Who Waited. And beneath a modest stone beside Helena Voess' grave, they carved, Here rests Dad who found love too late, but never let it die.